I work from home mostly at night because my neighborhood is noisy during the day. To sleep, I use a loud fan and wear headphones, so I wouldn't notice if anything odd happened while I was out cold. At night, I listen to music through headphones while working, meaning I don't hear much these days. I moved into my duplex apartment 5 months ago, and the neighbors on the other side of my bedroom wall were a nightmare, yelling at each other, throwing things, blasting bass-heavy music, and just being awful. It got so bad I had to abandon my bedroom and sleep in the living room, but I could still hear them. I got used to banging on the wall, dealing with all sorts of racket, and started relying on the fan and headphones constantly. I always assumed the noise from above was just the rowdy kids upstairs. Poorly built duplexes with no real separation between units. If they slammed their front door, I'd feel it in my bathroom floor, even though we're far apart. Those hellish neighbors got evicted for some unknown reason a few months back and disappeared. Finally, I had some peace, but every now and then I'd hear a thud from the ceiling. I'd take off my headphones, turn off the fan, and nothing. Now I've got new neighbors, but they're quiet, even when the place seems empty. Still, those thuds kept happening occasionally. A few weeks ago, I moved back into my bedroom and the sounds got more frequent. Eventually, I decided to investigate. There's a loft space in my garage. We've got raccoons around here, so one day, I climbed up there with a flashlight. To my surprise, the loft wasn't limited to just the garage next door. This little room stretched all the way behind my house, though it was separated from the other side of the duplex by a plywood barrier. Looking around, nothing seemed out of place. It's an A-shaped space with plywood panels jutting out from the edges, leaving only a narrow path to crawl through. Basically, someone or something could hide behind any of those panels and stay invisible to anyone peering down that tight hallway. I didn't see much up there, and I convinced myself I was satisfied because I was too scared to go back. Not afraid of ghosts, but of stepping on a rusty nail or getting bitten by something. Tonight, though, there was a loud bang. I yanked off my headphones and switched off the fan. Then came more bangs, louder this time. I could clearly hear human footsteps stomping overhead, running toward the garage. Every hair on my body stood up. I grabbed a hammer and headed to the laundry room door that leads to the garage. I stood there for a minute, ready to smash someone's skull, or maybe have mine smashed, frozen in terror behind the closed door between the laundry room and the garage. Holding my breath, I heard a huge crash. Then the back garage door, the one leading to my backyard, flew open and slammed against the wall just 10 inches from me. Holy hell, I heard my chain link fence rattling and knew whoever it was had bolted. It still took me 5 minutes to muster the courage to step into the garage. When I finally did, oh man, I don't know what spooked that person, but they'd dropped or knocked down an entire survival stash from the loft onto my garage floor. There was something that looked like a dog bed, a plastic bag full of cotton, pillows, maybe an empty can of dog food, a single slipper, scattered papers and plastic bits, a wooden rack in a plastic bin stuffed with cigarette butts, and some liquid. Thankfully, only a few dribbles had spilled onto the concrete. They might have been peeing up there. I was terrified to look back into the loft to see what else might be there. I'm waiting for the cops right now. This loft in my garage is only accessible by jumping, grabbing a 204 beam, and pulling yourself up. I should have taken pictures of where it stretches over my house, but I'm not doing that now. I'd been hearing this person for 5 months, and they'd been listening to me too, I guess. I'll post an update later. The police came and asked me to quickly write down what happened tonight while they poked around the garage and backyard. They didn't climb up to the loft or take anything. I thought they'd want fingerprints or DNA for evidence, but I guess I was naive. They were here for less than 20 minutes, said they'd patrol the area, told me to lock my doors and to call if anything else happens, or 911 if he shows up. They said this kind of thing happens more often than I'd want to. No? So yeah, sleepless hours ahead. About 13 years ago, when I was a sophomore at a liberal arts college in Saul County, New York, something freaky happened. In my freshman year, I'd fallen in with a tight-knit group of theater buffs. 6 guys, including me and 1 girl. We all loved horror movies and ghost stories. That first year was tough, but we supported each other and made it fun. By the start of the next year, we decided that in October, with Halloween vibes in the air, we'd find a creepy wooded spot in a nearby town one night and scare ourselves silly. We did some digging and found a secluded area about 30 minutes away, famous for spooky sightings. Perfect. The 7 of us split into 2 cars and headed out at night. Let me set the scene. You turn off a busy main road lined with strip malls and restaurants, and boom, you're hit with total darkness. The area's thick with trees, a massive web of winding roads, barely any streetlights, and hardly any houses. Without GPS or a good sense of direction, you could easily get lost. We made sure our phones and flashlights were fully charged, just in case, but the plan was to drive around until we all agreed to stop and explore. So, following directions, we turned left off the main road and drove for about 30 minutes in that pitch-black maze, picking random turns, deliberately getting lost. My car took a turn, and out of nowhere we spotted a big log ahead, a dead end surrounded by trees. Behind that log, we all got out to see what was up. Past the log, we noticed 2 narrow trails branching off in different directions. Seemed like a good time to grab our flashlights and play amateur ghost hunters. We flipped a coin and took the right trail. It was so narrow we had to walk single file to avoid getting whacked by branches. For some reason, I ended up at the back. I'm usually pretty level-headed, but I've got to say, the deeper we went, the more uneasy I felt. I kept hearing noises deep in the woods and couldn't shake the feeling we were being watched. No one else seemed to notice, so I brushed it off as my imagination. Besides, we were there to get spooked, and anyway, we were 7 healthy college kids. What could take us down? We trudged down that trail for about 20 minutes, and just when I thought it'd never end, we hit a huge clearing. I mean massive, like an overgrown golf course, but wild and unkempt. Tall, neatly trimmed trees lined the edges, but it was so wide we couldn't see the far end from where we stood. I was thrilled to escape that cramped trail, but none of us expected a space that big. One of us glanced right and said, "Check that out." We turned and saw an old, run-down house a few hundred yards away. It was pitch dark, no cars, no signs of life. We walked over, shining our flashlights on it. Sure enough, the windows and doors were boarded up. I tried peeking through a gap in the boards on one window and saw an old white couch covered in plastic, but the room was empty. Whoever lived there was long gone. Since there was no way in, and we were all creeped out enough by the house, we decided to head closer to the trail we'd come from, sit in the field, and figure out where to go next. We started back toward the narrow trail, but before we could sit, my friend Milo froze. His face dropped and he pointed behind us. We all turned, and at the far edge of the field, right across from where we'd entered, we saw a tall, pale figure dancing between the trees. And when I say dancing, I mean it was hopping around, grabbing a tree, swinging around it, then doing the same with another, like some weird tree square dance. The moonlight was bright, but the woods were so dark it took us a second to process what we were seeing. Keon, the group skeptic, didn't spot it at first. I leaned toward him, pointed, and said, "Keon, look over there. Don't you see it?" He squinted, and the second he did, he gasped, grabbed my arm, and whispered, "What the hell is that?" What happened next sent a shockwave through us. Whoever, or whatever, it was stopped dancing, stared right at us, and started sprinting, straight toward us. Without a second thought, we panicked and bolted back down the trail. Keon, who hadn't seen it start running, yelled, "Guys, what's going on? Where are you going?" After about 15 seconds of mad dashing, I heard Keon scream, "Holy crap!" I glanced back and saw his flashlight bouncing as he joined the rest of us racing down the trail. It took us 20 minutes to walk in, but we were back at our cars in no time, piled in and peeled out. 5 minutes later, when we'd gotten a safe distance away, we pulled over and checked in with each other about what just happened. My heart was pounding, and I knew everyone else's was too. Nearly 15 years later, we're still friends, scattered across different states, keeping in touch through marriages, divorces, kids, you name it. But every so often, one of us randomly texts the group something about that night in the woods. It really happened, no doubt about it. That experience stuck with me, and I'm pretty sure it always will. What haunts me most is this. Whoever that was, they were dancing like a maniac in the forest at 1 a.m., then charged at a group of kids without hesitation, despite being outnumbered. Did he know we were there from the moment we parked? Was he the sound I kept hearing on the trail? Whatever the case, when he came for us that night, you can bet none of us wanted to stick around and find out what he was capable of. About a month ago, someone sent me some creepy Snapchat photos. I couldn't decide if I should post about it. I'm a bit paranoid and wasn't sure if sharing it might stir up trouble again. But since nothing else has happened in the past month, I figure I'll tell the story. English isn't my first language, so forgive any mistakes. I'm a 22-year-old girl from Bulgaria studying art in another town. I'd gone back to my parents' place for Christmas break, so this happened just after New Year's. They live in a small village near a bigger town where I grew up. We moved to the village, and now they've got a 2-story house. One night I was in my room sketching and listening to awesome horror stories on YouTube like I usually do. It was around 2 a.m., and I was deep into a scary tale, not realizing I'd soon be living my own. That's when I got a Snapchat notification. Someone had added me. I was confused but opened it anyway. Someone with the username Shadow789 had added me as a friend. Here's why that's weird. I don't use Snapchat anymore. It's just sitting on my phone for no reason. None of my friends use it either. Not since Instagram got stories and we all switched. I've got hardly any friends on there, and none of them are active. I don't have my location on, no little emoji thing that might show where I am, and I don't post my username anywhere online. So how'd this person find me? Curious, I added Shadow789 back and checked their profile for a picture or anything to hint at who they were. Nothing, just a Snapchat score of about 7. I set my phone on the desk and rewound the video to catch what I'd missed while distracted. As I was about to get back to sketching, I got another notification. Shadow789 had sent me a snap. I opened it, a photo of grass lit by a flashlight. I stared at it, puzzled, then typed in the chat, "What is this? Who are you?" It said they'd received it, then read it, but no reply. I started texting all my friends, asking if it was one of them, or if they'd given my username to someone. No one fessed up. The next snap came, a blurry shot that looked like a red square. I was losing patience and messaged again, "Who are you? Do we know each other?" They saw it, didn't answer. Then another snap popped up. I was ready to screenshot this time to show my boyfriend. It was a picture of what looked like a small knob, but I couldn't tell what it was. I replayed it, screenshotted it, and checked the photo. That's when I realized it was the little latch on the gazebo in our backyard. It hit me. This person was sending me snaps from my parents' backyard. And by the way, it's not easy to get back there. We've got a tall fence, and you'd have to scout around to find a way over. Plus, it was dark, so they must have checked it out during the day to figure it out. That freaked me out. I jumped up, ran around turning off all the lights, and peeked. through the window blinds into the backyard. It was cloudy and pitch black. I couldn't see a thing. Then another snap buzzed in. I was ready to screenshot again. When I opened it, I nearly screamed. It was a close-up of this abstract ceramic sculpture we've got back there. I bolted out of my room, not sure what to do. For some weird reason, I didn't want to wake my dad and tell him. My mom was asleep, downstairs on the couch, and I was upstairs trying to quietly open the super loud creaky door to our terrace without alerting my parents, or whatever was out there. I fumbled with it for 30 seconds but got it open and stepped out carefully, peering into the backyard. Nothing. I stayed low so they wouldn't spot me, but I couldn't see anything. I slipped back inside, trying to stay as quiet as possible. Then another Snapchat came from Shadow789. It was a photo of my mom sleeping on the couch, taken from outside through a slightly parted curtain. This freak had snapped her while I was out on the terrace. I lost it, screamed for my dad. He stumbled out of the bedroom, trying to calm me down as I babbled about someone in the backyard. I could tell he didn't fully believe me, but he grabbed his gun and went outside anyway. My mom woke up, trying to comfort me while I hyperventilated, unable to explain Snapchat to her. Dad came back after checking around and said he didn't find anyone. I showed them the photos, and they looked confused but said it was probably some kid or one of my friends messing with us. Thing is, I don't live in the big town anymore, and all my friends are back there or in other rural spots, not this village, so it didn't add up. Once I calmed down, I went back to my room and checked my phone, realizing I hadn't looked for new snaps after showing my parents. There were 3 more from Shadow789. One was a photo of our front gate, which I screenshotted. Then 2 messages. See you soon and goodbye. I blocked the account instantly. I barely slept that night. I texted and called all my friends, begging them to admit if they'd done it. Nothing. When I told my boyfriend, he asked around too. No leads. We tried finding the account, but it was deactivated. No more Shadow789. I deleted Snapchat that night and swore I'd never use it again. The next day, I went outside to see if the creep left anything. I found footprints in a muddy patch near where they'd snapped my mom. My dad didn't buy that it was an intruder, said it was probably one of ours. But I'm pretty sure it wasn't. To this day, I don't know who it was, how they found me, or what they wanted. Were they stalking me? Are they still out there? I'll never know. This happened a few years ago when I was about 8 or 9. Back then, my old bedroom faced the street and was right next to our front door. It was tiny, built where the old front porch used to be. The roof sloped down toward the window, which took up most of the wall. My bed barely fit, pressed against the window, running parallel to the door. A wardrobe squeezed into the corner between the door and window, making the space feel odd. Every night I'd check that the curtains were fully closed. Even as a kid, I got paranoid about stuff like that, things that shouldn't even cross a child's mind. I usually slept fine. No nightmares, no random noises waking me up, nothing. But midway through the school break that year, I woke up to the sound of someone breathing. I couldn't move, couldn't breathe myself. I was just stuck. I vividly remember seeing a man standing in the corner of my room, half hidden behind the curtain like it had shielded him. Of course I could see him, a dark figure just standing there watching. After what felt like hours, I managed to fall back asleep. In the morning I told my mom, and she said it was just a weird nightmare, that I was fine. But the way she said it didn't feel convincing. Those sleep paralysis episodes went on for about a year, stretching into the next school break when I was 8 or 9. I remember waking up one night like most nights that year with the man in the corner. Only this time I could move. I stayed perfectly still though, now knowing he was really there. I could hear his faint breathing, like he was trying to hide from me as much as I was from him. I couldn't stop thinking he'd been there every night for a year. My mind raced. I'd run out, scream for my mom. She'd call the cops. They'd catch him and he'd be gone. But I couldn't do it. He was basically blocking the door. I spent the whole night staring at him, trying to sleep. Around 5 a.m., when the birds started chirping, I finally drifted off. When I woke up, he was gone. First thing I did was tell my mom. She looked worried, like she already knew something. Then I heard voices outside. Turns out it was our neighbor, and a cop taking a witness statement. Around 6 a.m., our neighbor had spotted a man standing outside my window on her way to work. She'd called the police, but he was gone by the time they arrived. Other neighbors came out and said they'd seen him too. By midday, looking at our house, there were no signs of a break-in, just 2 footprints in the flower bed under my window. My mom told the cops about my experiences, and they figured he'd been doing this for a year. The streetlight outside cast his shadow into my room, making it look like he was inside all that time. He'd been patiently waiting outside my room. Who knows what would have happened if my neighbor hadn't caught him that morning. She almost missed him entirely. Never pick up a hitchhiker. That's something an old family friend, Mara, drilled into me when I was a kid. It stuck with me all these years, popping into my head whenever hitchhiking comes up. Still makes me a little sick thinking about it. Mara grew up around the same time as my dad, so this was back in the early 80s, I think. She was in her mid-20s then, a genuinely kind soul, always ready to help anyone in need. That's just who she was, and I can't picture her any other way. So one day she was driving into the city, about 2 hours from her town, when she saw a guy walking along the roadside. As she got closer, he turned and stuck out his arm, thumb up, classic hitchhiker style. Bless her heart, Mara pulled over and asked if he needed help. She told me he was super polite, maybe even a bit shy, as he asked for a ride into the city. Mara smiled, opened the car door for him, and he tossed his bag in the back, buckled up, and off they went. They chatted pleasantly for most of the trip, about friends, the news, random stuff. Small talk, but nice. She felt like they were hitting it off. She even bought him dinner at a rest stop a little past halfway. She said he seemed flustered and embarrassed when she paid, but they'd talked about money earlier, how he was broke, which was why he was walking such a long stretch. He gave in eventually, and they hit the road again. When they got to the city, he thanked her profusely for the ride and the meal, and asked to be dropped off downtown. Before getting out, he asked for Mara's phone number so he could check in with her someday and catch up. Thrilled at the idea of hearing how her new friend was doing, Mara scribbled it down for him and drove off, warm with the glow of a good deed done. Sorry if you were expecting something creepy to happen right then, but I think that's what freaked me out as a kid. How normal it all seemed. A week later, Mara got a call from her hitchhiker pal. He didn't let her get a word in after saying, "Hi." He told her she should thank God she was so kind, because when he first got in her car, he'd planned to chat her up, kill her at the rest stop, steal the car, dump her body in a ditch further down the road, and keep going like nothing happened. But after she talked to him so nicely and bought him dinner with a smile, he couldn't go through with it. He didn't think he could live with himself if he hurt someone as good as her. "Please, please, Mara, don't ever pick up another hitchhiker," he said, then hung up. She never heard from him again. When she tried calling back, it was a payphone number, and that was that. I know I'll never meet that guy, because I'm sticking to the advice he gave Mara's friend, me, and I'll never pick up a hitchhiker. I'm using a throwaway account for this, mainly for my own safety. You'll see why soon enough. To kick things off, I'll say I'm not someone who believes in the paranormal. That might matter for some details, especially if you're a die-hard believer. A quick disclaimer. I live in a pretty rough area full of gangs and crime. My backyard is fenced off with the back fence leading to the main road. I've got a history of auditory and visual hallucinations, and I've been living with my dad, Victor, for about 3 years now. I've got some serious mental health issues, so I'm never sure if I'm imagining things or just losing touch with reality. Our house is old school, wooden floors, creaky stairs that rattle every time you step on them, and a big fireplace in the middle that pumps heat through vents. Upstairs, there are 3 rooms connected by a hallway, with an attic hatch in the ceiling right in the middle. My dad's room is across from mine. The bathroom's opposite the stairs, and there's a railing, or whatever you call it, between our doors. It all started with rustling noises from the attic. I figured it was a bird stuck up there. It's happened before. The sounds mostly came in the morning, around 7 to 9 a.m., and at night, between 10 and 11 p.m. I asked Victor about it, and he thought the same, so I brushed it off. About 2 or 3 months ago, the noises got more regular, consistent enough that I couldn't ignore them. Still, I drowned them out with music or YouTube videos on my computer. I wasn't about to let my paranoia get the better of me. Then, one night I woke up at 3 a.m. and I swear I heard footsteps above me, moving across the attic floor. I could tell exactly where they were coming from. Panicked, I ran to Victor's room to wake him up. I don't know if we startled whatever was up there, but the noise stopped. He didn't believe me, chalking it up to my hallucinations. I've had them before. Sounds, sometimes sights. So I let his reassurance calm me down. Nothing happened for a couple of weeks after that. The morning and evening rustling kept going, though. One day, Victor, our dogs, and I went out for a walk. I left my computer on, door slightly ajar, and the bathroom door shut. We keep it closed when we're home so the dogs don't pee in there. We were gone for 3 or 4 hours. When we got back, I went upstairs and noticed my door was closed. I figured it was a draft. Before I could step inside, Victor yelled from downstairs, complaining I'd left milk and a pack of meat out of the fridge. I told him it wasn't me. He's a logical guy, always thinks there's a rational explanation, so he was puzzled but figured he must have done it himself. I was sure I hadn't touched the fridge. After talking to him, I saw the bathroom light on and the door wide open. I checked inside, nothing suspicious. Stepping out, I noticed some chipped paint on the railing, something I'd never seen before. It could have been coincidence. Maybe I shut my own door, left the bathroom light on, and never noticed the paint. Victor could have grabbed stuff from the fridge and forgotten. That's how I rationalized it. I didn't want to believe someone else was in our house. But when I sat down at my computer, it wasn't on YouTube anymore. It was on some European food website in English. No other signs of tampering, just that page. Maybe a pop-up, I thought. Things escalated from there. Victor and I kept hearing weird noises at night, bangs, thumps, even during the day. He works 5 days a week, leaving at 5 a.m. and getting back around 7 p.m. I don't work, so I'm home alone hearing it all. The dogs hear it too. They'd sniff and pee around the attic hatch. I knew I wasn't imagining it then. They're 3 or 4 years old and never peed there before. Last Christmas, Victor went away, leaving me alone for a few weeks. It was the scariest time of my life. I'm an adult. I should have been able to handle myself. But things got weird fast. The first few days were fine. I cooked a lot, spent time with the dogs, even made them treats. I'd stocked the fridge and freezer to last weeks, so I didn't need to cook much, just microwave or thaw stuff. But then I noticed small things missing from the fridge each morning. Bite-sized cheese snacks I hadn't opened were torn into, food I'd made vanished, and milk ran out way too fast. After 3 days, I called my friend Milo to stay over. I explained everything, and he was happy to crash on the couch for a few nights. To protect me, I guess. He's fearless and strong, so I figured he could handle anything. The first night he was there, we tested it. We pretended to leave, slammed the front door loud enough to trick whatever was up there, then crept back to the living room and sat quietly for 10 minutes, whispering at most. Then we heard it. A loud scrape near the attic hatch, like someone prying it open with their nails. Milo stomped the floor to scare it off. The dogs growled too. I wasn't alone in hearing it. I had proof now. I was terrified, and even Milo looked shaken. He said he wouldn't sleep if he heard it again and offered to stay up all night. I snapped, "No way, man, we're out of here. I'll pack, grab the dogs, and we'll go to your place." He agreed. We left that night. I came back the next afternoon with Milo to check. Dirty dishes were in the sink, used but unwashed. More food was gone from the fridge. I'd unplugged everything before leaving, chargers, lights, computer, but the computer was on. Luckily, it's password protected, so no one got in. I called the cops. They searched the house but didn't go into the attic, just opened the hatch, shouted up, and got no reply. They had no explanation for the food or the computer but couldn't help. I packed clean clothes and left again. Milo took me to my mom's place where I stayed with the dogs for a few days. When I got back, a neighbor caught me as I walked in. They knew Victor was away and said they'd seen 2 people climb over our fence while I was gone, jumping from the main road and running off. Weird stuff happens around here, but that was too strange. Usually people hop fences fleeing cops, not randomly. Inside, everything was as I'd left it. No missing food, same dirty dishes. That was the last time I heard anything odd. It's been almost a year now. Everything's normal. But knowing someone might have lived in our attic, meters from me, still freaks me out. What do you think? I'm still scared and confused, lacking any sense of safety. What would you do? I've always been tight with my cousin Theo. He's my age, and while we're not inseparable, we've always gotten along great. We'd hang out together at school, same classes all through elementary, and after hours too. When we were 12, in 6th grade, I went to Theo's place one Friday afternoon in late May. We were pumped for the weekend. Earlier that week, my mom called to say our granddad was in the hospital. It wasn't life-threatening, but they kept him overnight for observation. Both my parents and Theo's were staying with him and Grandma at the hospital since they all lived nearby. I got the green light to sleep over at Theo's with his 15-year-old brother Rowan in charge. We were cool with it. I got along with Rowan. He was never the bossy type some of my friends complained about with their older siblings. We ordered pizza and messed around like kids do. Around 9 p.m., there was a knock at the door. Theo answered it. Curious who'd show up that late, I watched from a distance. 2 older guys stood there, claiming they were from the city, investigating reports of low water pressure in the neighborhood. They asked if Theo's parents were home. When he said no, we'd been taught to say stranger in those situations. They started asking about the house's water pressure and if they could come in to check. Rowan stepped up, politely saying the water was fine and suggesting they try other houses. They hesitated, but eventually left after Rowan started closing the door. We shrugged it off and went back to goofing around. Later, we decided to crash. Theo and Rowan shared a room, and we agreed I'd sleep there too instead of on the couch, so we could chat while drifting off. Rowan grabbed a sleeping bag from their camping gear for me. In their room, they stripped to their underwear. Theo had mentioned once they'd started sleeping like that. I hadn't planned to stay over, so I didn't bring anything, but I didn't want to sleep in my clothes either. I stripped down too, feeling a bit awkward, though I knew they wouldn't judge, we were all guys. They climbed into bed, I slid into the sleeping bag, and after some random chatter, we fell asleep. Next morning, I woke up needing to pee. I slipped out of the sleeping bag and hit the bathroom. On my way back, I heard something from the family room across the house. I didn't think much of it, maybe Theo or Rowan, until I got back and saw them both still asleep. Trying not to freak out, I woke them and whispered I thought someone was in the house. They followed me quietly. As we reached the family room, we saw the two guys from last night, clearly robbing the place. One started toward us, pulling a white knife that looked nasty. We bolted for the front door, somehow got it unlocked, and ran outside. Lucky for us, a cop drove by right then. We flagged him down, told him about the guys, and he called backup. Within minutes, more cops showed up, stormed the house, and caught them. Turns out they'd broken in through a laundry room window with a busted latch, probably targeting the place because no adults were home, figuring kids would be easy to handle. While waiting outside as the cops searched, neighbors came out to see the commotion, including some kids from our school, even a few sixth graders. Then it hit us. We'd never grabbed clothes. Like some cliché nightmare, we stood there in just underwear, in front of everyone, for what felt like forever before we could go back in. At school that Monday, Theo and I got more than a few laughs and teasing for weeks until summer break. Rough times. This happened back in October 2019. I was flipping through my phone the other day and stumbled across some photos from it. Still not sure if I should upload them. It was a weekend, and I figured it'd be a good idea to get out of town for a day and introduce my girlfriend Nadia to my mom for the first time. Mom lives out on the plains, on a 40-acre chunk of land about 4 miles off the main road. The driveway's long, cutting right between two neighbors' properties. We rolled up around noon, and my brother Felix and his wife happened to be visiting too. I introduced Nadia to everyone, Mom, Felix, his wife, and all the dogs running around. I noticed right away that the loudest, most obnoxious one, a beagle named Rusty, didn't come bounding over to greet us like usual. Mom explained that the night before she'd gone out to grab something from her truck, and when she came back in, Rusty darted past her and took off into the fields. He hadn't come back yet. It wasn't too strange. Dogs out there sometimes run off at night and show up again a few days later. Later that day, Mom brought up something else. She said she and my nieces, who were staying over, had been woken up around 1 a.m. by all the dogs going nuts, howling and barking like they'd lost their minds. It went on for a while before they finally settled down, and everyone went back to sleep. We didn't think much of it and just kept enjoying our quiet day out in the middle of nowhere. A few hours later, though, we started noticing this hawk circling over the same spot in the field all day long. Felix and his wife decided to go check it out while I was messing around with something else. A few minutes later, Felix came back, looking off. He pulled me aside and said he'd found Rusty, but something wasn't right and I should come see before we told Mom. I followed him out into the field, bracing myself to find a dead dog, maybe hit by a car or torn up by a coyote. As we walked, I spotted a trail of blood in the grass, then a bigger puddle, and another trail like something had been dragged. It led us to where Rusty was lying. I rushed over, but the second I saw him, I knew this wasn't normal. The grass around him was all flattened and trampled, and he didn't just look dead, he looked wrong. I got closer and froze. He'd been skinned, not like some animal had chewed him up or birds had picked at him. His head, tail, and paws still had fur, but everything else was gone. The cuts were clean, straight lines like someone had done it on purpose. Some sick freak had killed him, skinned him, and taken his hide right there in the middle of the night, just a few 100 feet from Mom's front door. It hit me hard. Nadia and I had been laughing and relaxing all day, and this had been out here the whole time. Of course, we called the cops. It took them 2 hours to get out there. Guess that's what you get living so far out. They took pictures of the scene, asked a bunch of questions, and we started looking around more ourselves. We found tire tracks in the dirt nearby, but there was no way to tell how old they were. Could have been from that night or days before. Then we spotted a pile of horse manure not far off, and it looked pretty fresh. Whoever did this might have ridden out on horseback, done the deed, and left. The cops didn't have much to say, just wrote it up and left. To this day, they've never followed up with anything. No leads, no nothing. Nothing else weird has happened since then, thankfully. Mom put up some wildlife cameras around the property and fixed the fences so the dogs can't slip out anymore. But we're still in the dark about who did it, or why. I ran across those photos on my phone today, and it all came rushing back. I can't bring myself to delete them, but looking at them still turns my stomach. I've shared this one a few times before, but it feels like it fits here. It's something I went through a while back. Still creeps me out to think about. I'll be the first to say it could have all been in my head. The mind's a tricky thing, and it can mess with you pretty good. Sorry if this runs long. When I was a kid, I was scared of everything. My dad, Marcus, used to tell me, "Don't be afraid of ghosts. Be afraid of living people. They're the ones who can actually hurt you." In my late teens, I came into some cash after Marcus died in a weird sword-related incident. Don't ask. I got an inheritance from him, including a cabin he and Mom owned near Mount Bachelor in Oregon. By then, Mom couldn't keep up with the payments, and renting it out wasn't cutting it anymore. They'd put it up for sale less than a month before, still working out the paperwork with the realtor and lawyer. That meant no more renters. It was just sitting there empty. I saw it as a chance to get away and clear my head after all the chaos. I quit my job, packed my snowboard, grabbed my dog midnight, he's gone now, and drove up in Marcus's old car he'd left me. It was our family cabin rented out year-round when we weren't using it. I had the keys and the alarm code, so I didn't bother stopping by the rental company to let them know I'd be there. Didn't think it mattered. Still don't. But I'll mention it anyway. The first 2 days were chill. I spent them playing with midnight in the snow, snowboarding during the day, and kicking back at night with PlayStation, music, a few drinks, and smokes out on the balcony. I'd stocked up on food, cigarettes, and booze beforehand, so I pretty much locked myself in. Only went out to snowboard with midnight tagging along. Kept some DVDs and the PlayStation for entertainment. I was content, starting to unwind after everything that had gone down before the trip. The cabin's got 2 floors. Downstairs there's a living room, a guest bedroom next to it, and a little kitchen. Upstairs 2 more rooms and a balcony off the master bedroom. I mostly stuck to the living room, kitchen, and master, kept the other doors shut. Dark, closed-off rooms always gave me the creeps. Day 3 rolled around and I was in my routine, playing with midnight gaming, watching DVDs. Snow started coming down hard that day, so I didn't want to risk driving down the hill to the main road and decided to stay put. That's when things got strange. Our cabin's near 2 others, maybe a block apart, but anything else is a mile away. Just forest and towering pines all around. I'd noticed the 2 nearby cabins were empty the past few days, so it was just me out there. Around midday, I was outside with midnight and spotted what looked like footprints in the snow around the cabin. It was still snowing, so they seemed fresh, like someone had been there 20 or 30 minutes earlier. I figured maybe someone was staying at one of the other cabins and I'd missed it. The prints led away from my place and disappeared into the thicker trees. I shrugged it off and went back inside. Night fell and I climbed into bed with Midnight next to me. Then his ears shot up. He heard something, and he bolted off the bed, racing downstairs to the living room. I lay there, dead quiet, listening. He paced down there for about 5 minutes before running back up, doing that little dance dogs do when they need to go out, pee or whatever. Fine. I couldn't say no to him. I got up, and we headed downstairs to the side entrance so he could do his thing, but he didn't pee. The second we stepped out, he started pulling on the leash, trying to drag me toward where those footprints had gone. He kept sniffing along the side of the house and staring up at the roof. When he realized I wasn't budging, he plopped down and just stared into the dark. That wasn't like him. Normally, he'd do his business and be done. Maybe there was some animal out in the woods he wanted to chase, but no way was I letting that happen. I yanked him back inside, and we went upstairs. About half an hour later, I was lying in bed when I heard what sounded like footsteps on the roof. 6 big, deliberate steps. I tried telling myself it was pine cones dropping from the trees or some critter scampering around, but the strides were too spaced out, too human. It freaked me out. Midnight heard it too and ran to the balcony, door pawing at it like he wanted out again. I'm not a coward. I was in decent shape back then. Figured I could handle myself. So I grabbed my coat, boots, cigarettes, and a flashlight and stepped out onto the balcony. Lit a smoke, scanned the roof with the light. Nothing there. And the snow up top was untouched. Weird. Was I imagining it? Was Midnight just picking up on my nerves? I started to calm down, standing there shivering, heart thumping, staring out at the stars and the trees next to the cabin. That's when I saw it. On a tree a bit taller than the cabin, about 20 feet from the balcony, there was something that looked like a man crouching between 2 branches. His arms were stretched up, gripping the branch above him, squatting there like some kind of animal. What the hell was that? I wasn't sure if my eyes were playing tricks. I stood there, frozen, staring. Midnight got up behind me, pacing and letting out these low growls, but the thing didn't budge. I put out my cigarette, thinking about shining the flashlight on it, but something in my gut screamed not to. I backed into the room, dragging Midnight. With me, locked the door and aimed the light out there from inside. Nothing. Whatever it was gone. Later that night, I started hearing tapping on the balcony glass like someone knocking with their fingers. It went on for almost an hour, nonstop. Midnight kept staring at the door but wouldn't go near it. The weirdest part? I felt this pull like it was daring me to open the door, but at the same time, I kept hearing Marcus's voice in my head telling me to stay in bed and not do it. I listened to him, stayed put, and eventually passed out. When I woke up, everything was normal again. No more noises, no more weird vibes. The rest of the week I stayed there was quiet. No other strange stuff happened. I'll fully admit it could have been all in my head. A lot was going on back then, and I was pretty messed up after Marcus's death. Could have been stress messing with me. Still, I posted this again for feedback. To answer some stuff, yeah, I was scared out of my mind when it happened. Going out on the balcony was impulsive. I wasn't thinking straight. I stayed the full week after because I didn't have anywhere else to go. Mom had sold our house and was with family I don't get along with, and my dad's side partly blamed me for his death. Didn't want friends' pity either. Midnight. Never acted that weird before. Maybe he was just feeding off me. The cabin sold right after through a realtor. I never talked to the buyers or went back. I've had other odd experiences since, but nothing as intense as that night. Still freaks me out. I sleep with nightlights now, keep flashlights in every room just in case. Never posted here before, not even sure if this is the right spot, but this is one of the scariest things that's ever happened to me as a kid, and it stuck with me. It was about 10 years ago. I was 9. My family had just moved to California to live with my grandma Lita in her cramped little house, 2 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms. I was excited. Lita's an older Filipino woman, super religious, mixing Catholicism and Hinduism in this intense way. I'm not sure if that's a conflict. I don't know much about either faith. Her house was packed with shrines, candles, pictures of Jesus, Hindu gods, all giving off this strange energy I could feel even as a kid. I should mention I'm pretty open-minded now. Might even attract weird stuff like this. Not sure if that's relevant, but it might be. Back then I'd hear music, whispers, and smell odd things triggered by certain words. I was used to it, knew it was part of me. I'd always had a little interest in the mystical, not obsessed, especially not back then since I was just a kid, but enough to sit on the floor in Lita's dim, cluttered room and flip through her books on magic. Around that time, I started getting these overwhelming, constant thoughts about demons and evil stuff, like it was always running through my head. I'd calm myself down by reciting bits of the Hail Mary that my mom Rosa taught me. Lita's room had this heavy, creepy vibe, but I'd still spend time there alone, even though I felt like something was watching me. I could pinpoint the energy. It was coming from her closet. Lita's schizophrenic and wasn't on her meds back then, so her room was a disaster, especially the closet. It was always open a couple feet, stuffed with her junk spilling out. And the space in there was pitch black, way darker than the rest of the room. That's what I could see anyway. I slept in there with her and was always on edge, too scared to even shower alone. One night, Lita was out with Rosa, leaving me and my little brother Milo on her bed. I remember being terrified, unable to stop staring at this creepy green fairy thing Lita had hung on a string near the bed. It kept swaying, and I swear its eyes felt alive, like it was watching me back. I was sandwiched between Rosa and Milo, but sleeping the opposite way, head at their feet staring toward the closet. I fell asleep eventually, and in my dream I woke up. I sat straight up, heart pounding with this insane fear I'll never forget. I tapped Rosa to wake her, and she looked at me shocked, saying, "Ayana, you're bleeding." I touched my nose, blood was pouring out, then my eyes, ears, mouth, all leaking red. I freaked out and said, "Mom, I've been thinking about demons a lot and I can't stop. I'm so scared." She didn't say anything, just lay back down and fell asleep again. Then, in this awful, messed up moment, something pinned me down. It was dark. I couldn't see it, but I pictured a small white man sitting on my chest, knees digging into my collarbone, growling and hissing with these horrible noises while it choked me hard. I tried swinging my arms, but I couldn't move an inch. It felt like it lasted forever. I kept thinking, God, when's this going to end? Then I snapped awake for real, lying on my back, gasping for air, my chest sore right where it had been in the dream. For a split second I thought, oh no, is this real? Is it happening again? I stayed still, barely breathing, until I could muster the guts to turn and look at the closet. The fear hit me like a truck. That space was radiating the deepest, most vicious hatred I've ever felt. I'll never shake that feeling. It knew I was looking at it, and I knew it was looking back. We were locked in that moment. I reached over, rubbed Rosa's side for some kind of comfort, then lay back down and started praying the Hail Mary over and over until I could fall asleep again. Even as I drifted off, I felt like whatever it was lingered, but then it left the room. I could sense it go. When I woke up, I got up and stood by the closet. It felt emptier somehow. Growing up, I'd tell this story to friends for laughs, brushing it off. But I just finished my freshman year of college and moved back here for the summer, and it's been on my mind non-stop. This wasn't even the scariest thing that's happened. In this house, I'll see if anything else pops up soon. Hopefully not. This started about 4 months ago when I began hearing weird stuff from friends around my neighborhood. For context, I'm 17, living in a nice, pricey area with my mom, Lena, and my sister, Zara. Every morning at 5 a.m., I take my dog out to a park nearby. There's always the same 5 to 10 people there with their dogs at that hour. We chat, normal small talk, sometimes a little politics, but it's usually pretty laid back and easygoing. One day I showed up with my dog. He was raring to play and said hi to everyone. I've gotten to know most of them by now, even memorized all their dogs' names. We got into a conversation about strange things going on around the neighborhood, and people started sharing first-hand stories, creepy stuff they'd seen or heard. One guy swore he saw someone running through his backyard in the middle of the night. Another said they went out back one morning and found a dead squirrel with blood all over the place, no explanation. Someone else told me their dog went nuts one night in the yard, barking like crazy, then cowering for no apparent reason. All these people live within 30 seconds of my house, so I was instantly hooked and kind of freaked out. I went home that day and told Lena everything I'd heard. She said she'd noticed some shady-looking people hanging around lately too, which didn't help my nerves. I had a ton of schoolwork piling up at the time, so I tried to push it out of my mind, hoping nothing would happen to us and it'd all just blow over. A few weeks later, it was Christmas break, 2 weeks off school. I'd gotten into a routine of staying up until 4 a.m. every night, gaming my life away. One night, my phone started buzzing. I checked it. Zara was calling. I picked up and she was freaking out, yelling at me to get downstairs right away. I jumped up from my desk and bolted down, heart racing. When I got there, I saw our cat and dog both staring out the back window, locked on something. Zara was standing behind them, looking terrified. I ran over and asked what was wrong. Obviously, something was seriously off. She explained in this vivid, shaky voice that she'd been working on her laptop when the dog suddenly stood up and started barking at the window. She glanced out and saw a tall figure standing there, staring straight into the house. I didn't even think. I ran to grab a baseball bat, then rushed back to the window. For the next 30 minutes, Zara and I just stood there, staring out into the pitch-black yard, dead silent. I was gripping that bat so tight my knuckles were white. My mind was racing. What could have happened? Maybe it was nothing, just an animal Zara mistook for a person since I didn't see anything myself. But I couldn't shake the look on her face or how the pets were acting. It was like they knew something was out there. I can't tell you what it was for sure, but that night, something, or someone, was watching us from the dark, and it's stuck with me ever since.